Is the Final Four on track to feature all 4 #1 seeds?
Has NIL and the transfer portal completely changed the landscape of college basketball?
And can the Hokies recreate their success on the diamond from previous seasons?
All that and more on this week's edition of the 3304 Sports Tip-Off Show. Welcome back inside the amazing Moss Arts Center studio for the latest edition of the 3304 Sports Tip-Off Show. He's Taylor Bretl, I'm Miles Jordan, and it's March. We're going to be talking about some basketball today. We're talking about some madness. We're going to talk about the Sweet 16. There were some great games that went on last night.
I mean, I think great is a little bit of an understatement, Miles. I mean, there were some phenomenal games. It's kind of felt like March hasn't really had that madness. It hasn't had that upset. It's kind of like, where is that upset? It's been a lot of chalk so far, and now that it is still a little bit chalk, there's starting to be those upsets, those March moments. We're waiting for those buzzer beaters. You got one a couple days ago in Maryland's game. You got some last night even in Texas Tech's win, which we'll get into a little bit later, but it kind of seems like there's not much madness in March, but hey, it's still the Sweet 16, so there's still plenty of time.
Yeah, you talk about it. Not a lot of upsets. There's a lot of 1 seeds. Actually, all 4 1 seeds are still in the tournament as of right now. We've got 2 of them playing tonight, and 2 of them have already secured their spot in the Elite 8, but there's not a lot of upsets, so the top dogs are really having a chance to go at it, and now we're starting to see some of those closer games, some of those tighter finishes, some of those crazy March Madness moments that we talk about, and it all started last night with Alabama's win over number 6 BYU.
Yeah, I mean, I got some notes here to just go off of. This was a historic game for the Alabama program overall. I mean, 113-88. Final score, regulation, 40 minutes of basketball, 113 points, Miles. They averaged 91 points on the season, so not as shocked to see them score that much, but 25 made three-pointers, shot nearly 50% from the field. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. Mark Sears had 34 points himself, 10 of those being from beyond the arc. This Alabama team, while a 2 seed, they're not the number ones that feel so powerhouse, but they still are very dangerous.
They've been dangerous the whole tournament, and they really showed it last night. You talked about it. They're scoring 91-plus points a game, almost 92 points. They can't stop when they get on a roll, and they're really going to have someone who's really defensively sound that can step up and stop someone like Mark Sears, who can go off for 30-plus on any given night, like we saw last night. And granted, BYU's a great team, but Alabama really just had the upper hand in that matchup. But now we'll move on to number 1 Florida, who took on number 4 Maryland last night, and they got the win by up 16 points.
Yeah, I mean, this is the SEC bracket, isn't it? Florida taking that one big, as you just said, 87-71. 6 different players with 10-plus points in that one. I think that's what you really have to look at for this Florida team. I know we'll get into our picks later, but a little spoiler alert, I have them going all the way. It's just such a dynamic team all around. And for Maryland, I mean, Derek Queen, 27 points, a good way to go out to such a strong Maryland season. I mean, you run into Florida, there's not much you can do, but they made noise in the Big Ten, dropped to Michigan in the Big Ten semifinals, but made it here to the Sweet 16. Unfortunately, did lose pretty big, but this Florida team is really dangerous, Miles. It's going to be a tough task to beat them in any round of this tournament.
Yeah, you talk about Derek Queen, and he had a pretty amazing season, pretty amazing tournament. He had the game winner to get them in the position that they were when they lost. He's had an amazing freshman year, but he's not the only freshman that's been doing it, and not just in the Big Ten, but now we switch over to the ACC. We got Cooper Flagg, we got Duke. They knocked off Arizona last night.
Yeah, I mean, Cooper Flagg, 30 points. Let's just roll the B-roll as we speak real quick. Cooper Flagg, we're going to talk about the offense and the 30 points, but he was also doing it on the defensive side of the ball. He had a nasty block, which we must show right now, and he was just throwing up assists like crazy. How many alley-oops did he throw to his teammates? It just felt like the Cooper Flagg show. It's clear why he's going to be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft, likely this season. I know he's trying to hold those rumors that he might come back to Duke, but if you're going to be the number 1 pick in the draft, it would be shocking to see if he stays with the Blue Devils. But 30 points, unbelievable for him. But while Duke got the win, you have to turn it to Arizona, and you got to look at Caleb Love. Has faced Duke multiple times, being at UNC, and he had 35 points in this one, but this ends his career, had a long college career. He's a graduate, but it really showed he knew what to do to beat Duke while they didn't take him down. 35 points, and he had one heck of a game.
Yeah, it is really fitting that his college career comes to an end. The former Tar Heel taken down by the Blue Devils in the Sweet 16. It's kind of unfortunate how that all rolls out, but he's had an amazing career, like you mentioned, and he showed up at the biggest moments. You really think that he's going to be a really big impact player when it comes to time for him to turn professional after this season. But now for the final game of the night, and arguably the most exciting, we had Texas Tech, who took down number 10 Arkansas in overtime, mind you.
Yeah, Arkansas really the last remaining team to have that Cinderella run. They were the only double-digit seed in the Sweet 16, and their season ends here, unfortunately. But Texas Tech, like you said, a game-winning shot. Darian Williams, 7 seconds left, gets it to go to win 85-83. John L. Davis for Arkansas, while losing, had 30 points. Really felt like he was going to put the Razorbacks on his back and just couldn't get it to go. But what a game from the Red Raiders. They are that sneaky team. It's interesting calling teams sneaky when they're just a 3 seed, but the powerhouses are so big in college basketball. But this Texas Tech team is dangerous, battling in the Big 12, a strong conference, has not really seen much success here in March, and they're the ones putting not just the team on the back, but the conference on the back as well.
Yeah, and you talk about Darian Williams. He had the game winner in overtime, but he also had the game-tying three-pointer to send the game into overtime. You talk about clutch as a gene, and he really must have it there. He showcased it last night against the Razorbacks.
Yeah, I mean, he showcased it and a half, I think is the way you put it. And now you look at how the bracket lays out. Texas Tech is making their way, but they're going to have to play Florida, as we talked about. We'll get into this more as we get later on in the show, but I think we still have the second slate of the Sweet 16 to go, but for Elite 8 standpoint, I think this could be the best matchup of the Elite 8.
Yeah, you talk about it's going to be a great matchup, and like you mentioned, we're a little bit far out. We still got 4 Sweet 16 games to play. We still got the Elite 8 coming up in the next few days over the weekend, but if you had to pick right now, who would be your pick to take home this national championship this year?
I mean, I have to go Florida. I picked a chalk Elite 8 in my bracket outside of Texas Tech, so my Elite 8 is still very alive, but it's really hard to go against Florida. Every time I make a bracket, I want to find a reason to not pick the top dogs, to pick the underdogs. But with the transfer portal and NIL and how college basketball is going, it feels like this might start to be a trend. The good teams just get better. You see that here with Florida. But looking at my Final Four, I have 1 2 seed in it in Michigan State. Everyone else is a 1, Duke, Florida, and Houston. But I got the Gators. Who do you have, Miles?
See, I'm kind of with you on that. You never like picking the number 1 seed to make it all the way. You always want to see the upsets. But this year we didn't have that. And going into it, I kind of had to stay strong with the ACC. I chose Duke, and in previous years, I normally don't like them going all the way. They're always a young team with a lot of freshmen who kind of lack experience as you get later into the season. But I think this year, we've showed that hasn't really mattered. They've got Cooper Flagg, who's put the team on his back his entire season. Despite the injury in the ACC tournament, he's back. He's performing at a high level. You've got Tyrese Proctor, who's a veteran leader on that team and is really kind of paving the way for the Blue Devils to have the successful season that they're having. And then you got Conk Nipple and a bunch of the other cast of characters and the role players that Duke has on their team. I think that their resounding win last night over Arizona, who is a very good team, kind of just propels them one step forward to chase that 6th banner. And if any team's going to do it, I think that this Duke team might have the best chance to.
Yeah, while I do have Florida, I do have them losing to Duke. But before we send it over to our very own Braden Shank, I have to ask you the question. Who is your bad pick of your bracket? Everyone has one. You know you have one. Who is your bad pick?
See, we're gonna stick with the ACC here, and I really liked how UNC played in the ACC tournament. Despite the loss to Duke, came back down 24. They showed resilience. They played amazing in their playing game, won by 30-plus points. I really thought that if they could get a win over Ole Miss, that they could take it all the way to the Elite 8. And obviously that's not what happened. We saw Sean Padula, who we've seen play for a few years now, kind of show up big and play very well against the Tar Heels, a team that he's played against for years as well, and knocked them out in that first round. My Elite 8 pick was squashed on day one. So, I mean, it wasn't really the best for me, but what about you?
Yeah, I also fell into an ACC trap a little bit. I picked the Clemson Tigers just to the Sweet 16, not any further, but I was really confident. I know it's the 5 against the 12. That's the popular upset. Seems like it's leaning a little bit to the 11 over the 6, but feels like that 12 seed's always dangerous. And Clemson just 13 points in the first half. They crawl back all the way in the second half, score, 54? Got my hopes up, and then they fell. It's just an unfortunate end to the season to a team that, while they lost in the semifinals of the ACC tournament, really had those hopes of possibly being able to take the ACC tournament in Charlotte and maybe even win a trophy here in March Madness, and their round was just squashed within one round. But one more thing, just the ACC in general, Miles. I mean, is it a concern that the conference is really just run by Duke? I mean, they won the tournament without Cooper Flagg, as you mentioned, honestly with some ease against Louisville.
I think you kind of have to look at it from the flip side and say, well, at least the conference still has Duke. You have other teams that didn't perform as well as you would have liked them to this year, but at least when you look at least the Elite 8 for right now, the ACC has a team in The SEC came into this tournament with 14 teams. A lot of them have been knocked out. ACC came in with 4. We've talked about the 3 that have left, but Duke is still kind of that one last man standing. And the farther they go, the better the conference looks as a whole. So yes, it can be a little concerning when you just have one powerhouse at the top of the conference. But I think that breeds competition. And as you bring in new coaches like Will Wade at NC State, who's going to have a kind of a revamped program next year, and teams see how they played this year in the ACC, I think that next year is going to be more of a rebuilding year for the conference, and they're going to have to play up to the level of competition that Duke's been playing at all season long.
Well, you mentioned Duke, the remaining team in the ACC. Well, maybe they'll have their shining moment as they are still alive in March. But come April, which team will have their true one shining moment? And why is it even called a one shining moment? Well, Braden Schenk will let you know. Braden?
One shining moment. Okay. Maybe I'm not the next American Idol, but those 3 words have been synonymous with March Madness for nearly 40 years now. But have you ever wondered how this one single song became the sound for the big dance? Well, let's take a trip down memory lane and head to East Lansing, Michigan in March of 1986. Local singer-songwriter David Barrett just finished performing a set at a local bar before he stayed to watch Larry Bird and the Celtics play on national television. In an effort to explain the true poetry that he was witnessing on the TV screen to the waitress, Barrett pulled out a napkin, and slowly he started writing what would later become the lyrics to his new hit. He put these lyrics and recorded the first draft of his new hit onto a cassette tape. That tape would get passed off to a friend who got it in front of CBS executives that fall. Their reaction? It was a touchdown of a song. CBS asked Barrett if they could use the rendition to conclude their broadcast of Super Bowl 21 in 1987. And with roughly 90 million viewers tuned in to watch John Elway and the Denver Broncos square off with Phil Simms and the Giants, David Barrett was anxiously waiting for his one shining moment post-game. But there was an issue. The game ran long, and as a result, CBS cut the post-game montage and Barrett's masterpiece altogether. The songwriter got his shining moment, but was benched in the spotlight. Although a second shining moment came to be when CBS asked to use his song for the upcoming NCAA Men's Basketball National Championship that March. And this time, as the final buzzer rang and Bobby Knight and the Indiana Hoosiers claimed a national title, CBS would go off the air by introducing the world to one shining moment. As the iconic drum beat crescendoed in, the ball was tipped, and there you are, witnessing a visual masterpiece containing all the emotions, the heartbreaks, the triumphs, and everything in between, highlighting all the atmospheres, spectacular plays, and encapsulating everything that is March Madness. A tradition was born on that March day. And now, every year since 1987, one shining moment has served as the soundtrack to some of the game's biggest moments. But hey, sometimes every good idea takes a second chance and a napkin for inspiration, right? So when the final buzzer rings and the trophy is hoisted in Phoenix in just a couple weeks, this annual tournament will go off the air with the same tradition they have for the last 37 years. And that's with the infamous words of one shining moment. Guys?
Thanks, Braden. Well, I'm not going to try to sing and compete with that. Do you want to give it a shot?
I'm good. I think I'll
You're
pass,
good?
yeah.
Okay, well, we'll move on with the show. It is pretty interesting to hear really the history behind One Shining Moment and how it's lived up to today. It feels like those words just get more popular each and every year. But we have to talk about our favorite One Shining Moments. Do you have one that comes to mind?
The earliest one that I can remember is 2014, and we talk about Cinderella runs. This was the year for the Cinderella teams. The final was number 7 UConn versus number 8 Kentucky, and Kentucky's had a lot of amazing teams over the year. This might have been one of my favorites, and it's because of the moments, like you mentioned, from the tournament. You've got Aaron Harrison basically hits the game winner, game clinching shot, back-to-back rounds. He knocks off Louisville, knocks off Michigan. Sorry, he knocked off Wisconsin in the Final Four to send them to the final. The famous, this is the part where he always hits it. It's one of my most memorable calls from March Madness and one of my favorite moments. And it honestly tees up into next year where you guys had a pretty great year.
Yeah, that's got to be my favorite March Madness moment. I mean, it's not a Cinderella run. It was a 1 seed over another 1 seed. But like you said, getting knocked out in the Final Four in 2014, Wisconsin coming back the next year and defeating Kentucky in the Final Four, who was 38-0. That team featured Karl Anthony Towns, Devin Booker, Willie Cauley-Stein. I mean, that's a team full of NBA talent. You got the duo of Sam Dekker and Frank Kaminsky, and they were like Batman and Robin. Honestly, Batman and Batman. They were both very, very good for the Badgers. Knocked off that Kentucky team, and the quote was always, "We want Kentucky." They really wanted their revenge, and they really got it. Got to be one of the most fun March Madness moments in my life.
Yeah, you talk about it. They knocked off an NBA roster. You look up the NBA roster right now, and it's that Kentucky team. I guarantee that there were 8+, probably even closer to 10 stars that have performed in the NBA, not just played, but performed at a high level. Devin Booker probably being the leading one, but they were just a really sound team overall, and that's what you get when you have 2 1 seeds going at it like that, which is something we could see again this year, because as of right now, as we mentioned, all 4 1 seeds still in the tournament.
Yeah, it feels like college basketball is kind of in this way of chalk. That's what that's what you call it when you're picking a lot of 1s and 2s. You even look on a lot of analysts. You go to like Jay Billis, and this is my bracket, and everyone's like, you're just picking 1s and 2s, right? Is that really bold? And they end up being correct. And with NIL, with the transfer portal, it's just the good teams are getting better, and that's just the way college basketball is going. Do you think this is good for the sport, that you can really have more powerhouses and less upsets? Or do you kind of like that the upset can always happen?
I think there's 2 ways that you can look at this right now, and one is that it is just 1 year. It's been a single season, and yes, we haven't had a lot of upsets, and yes, you can grant a lot of that to NIL and the transfer portal, where players want to play at the best schools, but at the end of the day, you're still going to get those players start at a school for a reason. They start at a different school for a reason. They eventually transfer, but that means that talent is still at those quote-unquote lower programs, mid-major programs, maybe not your Power 4 conference, but they're still there. So I think that you're still going to get that spark. We saw McNeese knock off Clemson this year in the tournament, so there's still some upsets of teams that, honestly, you've probably never even heard of before that are going to show up and shock the world in the tournament. It was less this year, but I think that as NIL and everything progresses, we will still see some upsets. It'll just be at a lower caliber.
Yeah, I think it's don't judge a book by its cover, or don't just take the 1 year and assume what it will be down the road. I think even out of the transfer portal a little bit, I mean, these teams just have a lot of good young talent. I know we talked about Cooper Flagg. That's the name you think about when you think of college basketball. That's a freshman. That's not a transfer, right? That's just who your leader is on the team. You can obviously look at teams like Arizona, who just fell to Duke. You get Caleb Love to come to Arizona and things along those lines. But I feel like it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think I can answer my question I proposed to you on if it's good for the sport or not. I feel like chalk will be more common, but I don't think it'll just be that for the future. I mean, this is basketball. If your shots don't fall, you're going to lose. We saw that with St. John's, right? They rely on their offense so much, and Rick Pitino's squad just couldn't get shots to fall. They got bounced in that second round to Arkansas, who was a 10 seed. So I think also the depth with the coaches, moving around schools a lot. If they go to schools that are a lower seed, like I just mentioned, in Arkansas, that's a double-digit seed that makes it to the Sweet 16. So there's a lot of things to figure out. It's like a chess game, but you have to put a year break in between to resume it the next year. And it's just going to be interesting to see. I don't really think there's an answer for right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces, and it's honestly like a chess game with everyone moving around. You've got coaches, you've got players, you've got people moving conferences. It's hard to figure out where everybody started. But luckily for us, we've got our very own Riley Klaus, who can figure out and let you guys know where each player in the tournament started their college career. Riley?
In the modern era of the transfer portal, allowing players to hop, skip, and dunk their way to new schools, some programs have gone all in, embracing a full reset. This makes some lineups completely unrecognizable, and this year's Sweet 16 is a prime example. I'm left with one question. Can you recognize the starting 5 based on where each player began their college career? Now, some are gimmies, like Purdue, who's all homegrown, or Duke and Michigan State, who feature just one splash edition. But as we get further down, I guess majority rules for Houston and BYU. And if that's Tennessee and that's Maryland, then that must be Texas Tech. What? Michigan? Not as easy as you thought. And it leaves fans completely guessing what team is which. Can you recognize these starting 5s? Take a look, pause if you need, and we'll reveal in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, there you go. Just one member started their college career at the correct answer school. And how about one more set? Here you go. That's right. Half of the Sweet 16 featured a lineup of players who all started their career at different places. So, as we get closer to cutting down the nets, keep an eye out for where that star player really got started. Guys?
Thanks, Riley. Great stuff as always. And while it is March and we're still talking a lot about basketball, that's not the only stuff that's going on in the world and in the New River Valley. We've got some Hokie's diamond sports that have been popping off recently, and Hokie's wrestling season just came to an end. So for more on that, let's take it to Hayden Tolbert with the 2-minute drill.
How did the Hokies fare at the NCAA Championships this past Saturday? Someone tells Sam Tackett to give Thor's hammer back before they start filming the next Avengers movie. And Hokie softball keeps racking up wins. Can these ladies keep it going in an important ranked matchup this weekend? Well, you're just about to find out in a new edition of the 2-minute drill. Let's get this thing rolling. A bow wrapped up Virginia Tech's wrestling season, and it wasn't in the color of maroon. More so the color of Nebraska red, as Cornhuskers Ridge Lovett upset defending national champion from last year, Caleb Hitman Henson, which caused much controversy for VT fans as the second period ended scoreless after an overturned takedown call that set up Lovett comfortably for the third period, where he scored 1 point escape late in the third to win the 149-pound championship. The Hokies' season ends disappointingly as they finish 11th in the championships, with Penn State taking another national title. Let's come back to the NRV, where Virginia Tech baseball had a successful past week in the Diamond. Virginia Tech upset number 16 Louisville in a home series, taking games 1 and 3, where Sam Tackett hammered 3 home runs in the first 2 games in the series, and in the final game, Tackett was walked 4 times. That's when catcher Henry Cook came to the rescue and recorded 2 for 4 from home plate and knocked an RBI double with Tackett on single to help Virginia Tech inch closer to a series-clinching win and Coach Chef's 600th career win as head coach. The Hammerin' Hokies would later go to Radford to win the Sharkies Classic Tuesday 6-1 and take that momentum on the road to face another 16th-ranked Wake Forest led by star pitcher Chase Burns. Finally, 12th-ranked Virginia Tech softball ended a doubleheader 2-0 against Longwood this past week, where Hokies took care of business in Game 1, ending the game in 5 innings, and won Game 2 on the same day, where Corey McMillan led the way with 3 hits and 2 RBIs. The Hokies combined for a whopping 17 runs on Wednesday and increased their win streak to 6, heading into a big matchup in not just the ACC, but the nation, as they face 16th-ranked Stanford at home this weekend starting Friday. So fans, if you plan on attending, make sure you are aware of the sun and strikeouts from Emma Limley, because both are going to be shining bright. That's going to be all for me for this week's 2-minute drill. Back to Miles and Taylor.
Thanks, Hayden. Well, that'll do it for the latest edition of the 3304 Sports Tip-Off Show. For the talented Taylor Bretl, for our reporters in the back, Braden Shank, Riley Klaus, Hayden Tolbert, for myself, we're going to say so long and until next time on the 3304 Sports Tip-Off Show.